Welcome to another live stream. It's our time to get together and talk about gang stalking. And this one is, we're gonna go into it. We're gonna look at some of the freaky stuff involved in it. And I've mentioned before that when you look at what's really happening to targeted individuals, to most people it wouldn't seem plausible. It seems like something that is more akin to a persecutory delusion that fits the criteria of mental illness. And, there's a lot of different ways that this can happen to someone. And there's a lot of people who will disagree on different aspects of gang stalking. But the trick is to amalgamate these things together properly and create an accurate picture of what's happening. And it's similar to when people get into the infrastructure of the secret societies or the government and the deep state. And of course, there's always those people out there, well, that's just conspiracy theory. That's ridiculous. And when you look into it, you're going to see that there's more than a kernel of truth to these things. And there are conspiracies. There are secret societies. There are secret programs. There are people who are involved in high levels of witchcraft and the occult and stuff like that. And but to most people, it seems ridiculous. And of course, it's designed that way. It's part of that plausible deniability, that framework that just makes anything that would resemble the intricate, elaborate infrastructure of this world and the truth about what's going on. It just makes it look ridiculous. Okay, so I'm gonna attempt to look into some of those things, and that's why I call this the evil awakening. I've talked about the fact that with targeted individuals, their whole life is flipped around. Okay, the reality that most people, and I'm not talking about all the targets out there who say, well, I've been dealing with this since I was 3 and I was part of a satanic ritual. And there are people out there that have experienced those things, and I'm not making fun of it. I'm just saying that, even for those people, there is usually a time where their targeting gets so intense that everything that they'd experienced before that in life was more of a preparation. And when you get into people who've experienced the satanic ritual abuse and have been part of maybe a family that that's into the high levels of masonry or Rosicrucianism or witchcraft or something like that, because that happens. We've seen that stuff, and we're going to talk about that. But usually, even for them, you get to a place where all of a sudden your world changes drastically. And the methodology of gang stalking is like that. You will experience a flip of your reality. All the things that you were raised to believe that, your aspirations or your goals, it's completely unattainable with the oppression that you're experiencing as a targeted individual, where once you thought maybe things were a little off, or you would run into a problem here and there. When you experience that overt targeted individual experience, there's nowhere you can go. I mean, you're literally blackballed. You're dealing with surveillance. You are dealing with mischief in every area, conceivable. And targets are usually overwhelmed and oppressed in a way where they become isolated very quickly. And the different methodologies of trauma mind control are used on them. Of course, the framework of that involves gaslighting and reprogramming, and we're going to talk about some of that stuff. But it's important to realize that the awakening involves 2 aspects. The first is, of course, the fact that the targeted individual is awakened to this reality. Okay, the reality that the infrastructure of where they are is not what they thought it was. Okay, and the people out there that don't know about this stuff, they don't see it. They're blind to it. They think targeted individuals are mentally ill. They think that they are suffering from some type of persecutory delusion. A lot of targets will try to talk about this stuff with someone. They may even call the police or get a hold of, maybe someone of influence or maybe even a family member. But once they start talking about this, of course, it looks crazy. There's no possible way that there could be so many people turned against the target that all the stories, all the paranoia involved in the targeted individual's life can't be true. It couldn't be possible for them to be experiencing this type of persecution in such an elaborate way. But they are. They are. I mean, it's really that bad. And for most people, they're not going to be able to wrap their head around it. And it opens up the door to distort the reality of the targeted individual in a lot of different ways, which moves into gaslighting. And it's all, amalgamated together, right? All those things are amalgamated together. You have the trauma invasion, where I've talked about, the initial setup for the target can involve different things that are, not necessarily aggressive, but noticeable. And that might go on for a long time. You may, as I said earlier, have experienced some things in your life that you didn't even understand what was going on. A lot of targets will get that, experience maybe with some type of satanic thing when they're a kid, or they'll be involved in something. Maybe they were taken into a room and things were happening to them, and they didn't understand what was going on. And, these little conversations that can happen around, the child as they're growing up, and they didn't know what was being discussed. They knew something was happening, but it's just, for the landscape of a child, there's a lot of things that they don't understand. There's a lot of things that are going on around children that they, it's not something that they're really part of. They're sitting at the little kiddie table, and it's just none of their business. But of course, these things are incorporated into targeting. A lot of times I've talked about some of the stuff involved in MK Ultra, and we're going to get into some of these things that involve the higher levels of witchcraft and the secret societies, and how they're, it sounds crazy. Like I said, that these things are actually out there. And gang stalking can happen to people a lot of different ways. I've talked about the fact that, some people might just be experiencing, surveillance or workplace harassment, but then there's targets out there that, their whole world is flipped around, and there's no escape. They can't get away. It just seems to be on every street corner and everything. I've talked about how the reprogramming and the infiltration through sensitization and conditioning can get targets to read into things. Sometimes that happens, but you have to remember, even if they're wrong, that there is a way that these things come about. There's a reason why they are looking at the world differently. And, that's kind of the trick of gang stalking, is to get the target to look for it. Because the part of the gaslighting process and that sensitization that is used against targeted individuals is to get them questioning their own perception of reality, and to get them to second guess themselves, to believe the disinformation that they're just hallucinating, or they're crazy or whatever. And psychiatry is used, and so we're going to get into some of that. But it really is that in depth in some cases. And there's a link that I put up in the description, along with the link to help support me in the channel, which I usually put up there. There's another one before that, though, and it deals with some of the stuff that we're going to talk about that involve. I think there's a book out there called The Black Awakening, and I haven't read it, but it was referenced in the video that I put up there. And there's when you get into the Midnight Ride, I don't know if you guys have ever watched the Midnight Ride. It's interesting. You got John Pounder, and he usually talks about things involving conspiracies and biblical stuff. Now, I just like to say, I don't agree with everything that they talk about. I'm not a flat earther, for example, or I don't get into some of the things that involve their view of eschatology or whatever. But you know, the thing is that we're all on a journey, okay, and we're all you know, kind of extrapolating different points of data together, and you know that's a process. And so even though I don't agree with everything that's on there, I wouldn't say that everything is wrong. And I'm like that with a lot of, you know, different YouTube channels and stuff like that. I don't like to criticize people. I think that we're all, you know, on kind of the same journey, in the sense we're trying to figure things out. It's not to say there's not false teachers and stuff out there, but I don't know. I wouldn't go that extreme on some of the differences, and maybe the pre-tribulation rapture, and you know, things involving eschatology. Those things are kind of up, you know, for grabs a little bit. You know, it's not necessarily you know, an issue where you can divide harshly to where, you know, people you know, they might disagree on whether Jesus was really you know, he had the authority of God or whatever, and that he's returning, and so on and so forth. That'd be pretty you know, that'd be a pretty serious matter. But you know, getting back to what I'm talking about, they had a pretty interesting video on some of the things that happened behind closed doors in the secret societies and the infrastructure that's out there in the world, that, like I said, to most people would seem like, you know, just a bunch of crazy talk when you have those things there. And I've talked about that before. When you get into the infrastructure of what you're dealing with, not only for targeted individuals, but pretty much everyone. A lot of people don't know about these things, where you get into the MK Ultra, CIA, different you know, programs, you know, Monarch, COINTELPRO, different things involving organized stalking, cognitive warfare, and different experiments that are going on in the government realm. Counterterrorism that's moved over into corruption. You got the obvious experiments on people, as far as the trauma-based mind control and gaslighting. Some people talk about the terrorist screening databases and how these things can become involved in monitoring people. And you get into the government, the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, the DHS, the DOD, NATO, the corrupt you know, factions of the government. A lot of people refer to it as the deep state. And you know, I've said this before, that I don't believe that just because someone's in you know, maybe a police department where you've been harassed, or in the government in general, it doesn't mean that they know about this stuff or they're after you or whatever. There's a lot of people involved in the government that are literally just, you know, workers, you know, just like anyone else. They're not involved in secret programs. It's not to say that things like that don't happen, but I think that's a mistake that a lot of people make, where they start, you know, calling up the fusion centers and assuming these people know what's going on, and they might not know anything about you. And I've talked about the salient landscape of the target individual is that these things are amalgamated together. Okay, there's things out there that are purely demonic. There's things out there that are amalgamated together with both, and there are things out there that involve you know, conscious collusions of people that are literally being paid with professionals and stuff like that, that people are literally being experimented on. Okay, and the people are breaking into their house, or you know, getting in there and tampering with things, or you know, putting cameras or whatever in their house. And then sometimes people are just led to believe some of those things, and there's an amalgamation of all that. But in order to understand how these things work together, you have to see that it all pretty much starts in the spiritual dimension and moves down into the puppets. And I've talked about the secret societies, and even witchcraft, and how when you get up into the higher levels of that, it's mixed together and you can't really tell it apart. But there's a reason for these things. And I've talked about when you get into what happens with the perps, a lot of people, they wonder why are these people doing this stuff? Well, there's a lot of psychological reasons as to why people become involved in gang stalking. If you were just going to, separate it into that area where people, they need it, they feel in control, or, they're ruled over by spiritual entities, or they're amalgamated in some type of fraternity or whatever. And they do it that. There's reasons, or like I said, there's financial stuff. There's all kinds of things going on. But the thing about it is that even when you get into the secret societies and everything, there's a way that people get their hands dirty, and it's almost similar to what you see up in the higher levels of the occult or witchcraft. And like I said, you guys can watch that video. There's a little bit more information in there, but there was one example of where they would all get together, and there was like these 7 different rooms representing 7 different sins. Okay. And evidently each room involves some type of, I don't know, condemnable act or sin, like in the Catholic religion, you have the 7 deadly sins. It wasn't that, but it was probably similar to that, where people would do these things, and they would move through this level. And it's really kind of like what you do when you get involved in witchcraft or the occult. You make oaths, or when you get on the higher levels of Freemason or whatever, they do these things, and they call down these curses upon themselves and so on and so forth. And they're really they're setting themselves up in the sense that if they betray the fraternity or the secret society they're involved in, they're in trouble. I mean, and there's a level of fear involved in that, and it's a perfect medium for things to go on that should be exposed that never will be, because people become enmeshed. And even when you get into just the lower level infrastructure, which is a lot of there's a lot of power in that, in the sense that there's a lot of, I don't know, you can get blackballed even if you're not in the higher levels of these secret societies. Once you become blackballed, they have that infrastructure, whether it's the businesses, the good old boy societies, or whatever. They have a lot of influence, and someone can be shut out. They can experience that isolation to where they're shunned by the community. There's a lot of coercion involved in that. But when you get up into these things and you're doing the oaths, you're committing the sins, you're going through these rituals, and what's happening? Well, you're kind of selling yourself over to the demonic realm. And and some of them even involve things like blasphemy or whatever, blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, where you're doing these things, where you're engaging in sexual acts, like sodomy or other things involved in some of the stuff that like when you get into Epstein Island or whatever, and people just blackmail is an issue, and they just get their hands dirty. They get into that mode where they really don't feel like they have anything to lose, right? And target individuals will wonder that. It was like, what's going on with this? And aren't they scared of getting thrown into hell or whatever? Or don't they know what they're doing is wrong? Well, they know, but there's that ad populum coercion that is involved when you get into groups of people, that type of mob mentality where and there's a lot of that out there. I've heard a lot of comments from people before that have kind of admitted to me that they know what's going on. And you'll hear stuff like, well, just everybody else is going to hell too, or all my friends are going to be in hell. And it's just like, if billions of people are doing it, it can't be as wrong as you think it is. And I've mentioned before that the target individuals are a pretty small group of people, right? It doesn't work if you use this kind of methodology and psychological warfare on a lot of people, because then people would know, and it wouldn't be obfuscated. It wouldn't work. They would have a support mechanism. It would eventually come to light. And the reason it's so effective to use against individuals is because it's obfuscated. No, there's not a whole lot of people that experience it. And so when the target tries to get help, or they try to speak up and they try to tell people what's happening to them, that people are breaking into their house, or they're experiencing directed conversations or workplace harassment or surveillance, or whatever, fuming or direct energy weapons or V2K or demonic attacks, that it's so unbelievable. And it's such a small minority of people that are talking, that are just the crazy people. They're the nuts. And nobody's going to say anything, because the people that know about it, like I said, have become enmeshed in the sense that they've sold out, and the kingdom of darkness knows how to get control of those people in the sense that they will end up like you. Okay, there is a sense of fear and coercion involved in people who know about gang stalking or are involved in the fraternities or involved in some of the stuff that we're going to get into, who are literally sent after people, whether, they're breaking into their houses or, attacking them or harassing them at work or spreading rumors about them or whatever. They know it can happen to them. Okay, they obviously know they're doing it. Okay. And that's part and parcel of it. But once these people, do these things, whether it's the 7 rooms of pestilence or these different oaths or attacking people or getting their hands dirty or just giving in, well, once that happens, there's a type of ownership. And it's similar to, what you'll experience when an individual becomes addicted to a drug or a substance. And I've talked about that. At first, you are, kind of playing around and you are adding spice to, whatever, the landscape of your life is. You're going out and you're using maybe alcohol or some other substance, and you're just kind of adding to, your life. You're I don't know, you're enlarging your your arena of entertainment at that point. And if you like it, you're going to keep doing it, and you feel in control. There's a sense of empowerment, but it's false. It's a false sense of security, because what happens to people is they become addicted. And then, at first it might not be a type of physical dependence. It might become a type of psychological stronghold. I've talked about the pragmatic stimuli involved in some of the, false religions or addiction. Or some of the stuff targets deal with is that if they get involved in something or they do something, they'll have that type of, psychological and stimuli, that reinforcement around it that makes people think that it's working. It's like the perps. They do what they're supposed to do, and life seems to work smooth, at least smoother than it is for the people they're attacking. And so in that sense, it seems like it's working. Or when someone becomes addicted to something, otherwise they just don't feel happy, or they feel stressed. At first, it's psychological, and they can't wait to go do it because they're having fun. They're adding spice to their life, but then they need it. And then they're starting to experience the negative effects of it, right? But they have to do it now, right? They're getting up in the morning. They might feel a little hungover or nervous or whatever, and they can't wait until happy hour. But when happy hour comes, they get, whatever they get out of it, but it just kind of makes them normal. And then, they pass out. There's slavery involved. It's obvious it's not working the way it used to. And then it gets to the point where if you go far enough with addiction, or just like anything, that you have to do it constantly. So you become that alcoholic who's got all these bottles of booze hidden around their house, and they got to wake up in the middle of the night, smoke 3 or 4 cigarettes, and take some shots. They get an hour of sleep. They wake up. They're basically always drunk after that, and until the train goes off the tracks. And you see the bondage, you see the obvious slavery involved in it. You don't know, and it's similar to what happens to people who get involved in these secret societies. It seems like these things are working. It seems like they're part of something that has added to their life. Maybe they're getting better deals in the community. They're involved in an infrastructure. They're as far as the perps, they're getting little perks. They might get money. People involved in witchcraft. A lot of times they'll talk about access to sex and drugs and all these other things that appeal to their flesh. But eventually they get sold out. Eventually they get to the point where their hands are dirty and it's obvious slavery. Okay, and I've mentioned that before, that when you get into the targeted individual experience, and you get those lateral comparisons, or you're moving through your landscape, and these people are kind of parading around you or whatever it is. Well, how's that working for you? You say that all these things that we're doing are wrong or whatever, but look at you. Look at your life. You're losing. You're on the outside, and we're the ones who have all the benefits. We're not worried about people tampering with our food. I ain't worried about anybody breaking into my house. I'm not walking around in fear. You are losing, and you should have conformed, or whatever goes along with the disinformation and all the little games that go into gang stalking, because they're there. It's part of the gaslighting. Sometimes they just they have the right to do this stuff to you because it's part of some type of lie where they're fixing your character defects, or the targeted individual might have something in their past that warrants this, or it might be just some rumor, or it's some character defect. Maybe they have an addiction, or they've experienced a type of infiltration with a honeypot or whatever. We're going to talk about some of that stuff too, but it's there. And the truth is these people are obviously miserable. Okay, they obviously have to do this stuff. Their hands are dirty. The obvious problem of evil always comes up when you're dealing with targeted individuals, in the sense that, like I said, there's a lot of ways this stuff works. And for people just to think that everybody's some type of guinea pig or whatever, it's not like that. Some of this stuff is spiritual. Some of it is evil. Some of it involves the occult. Some of it involves some really wicked things that are obviously, not only wrong and illegal, but, wicked. Okay. Like murderously wicked, sadistically, evil. And that's an issue. And it's something to consider when you're extrapolating all this information and putting it together. When you're looking at people who are talking about witchcraft, or you're looking at people who are talking about the Masons or the fraternities or the government programs, or some of the generational involvement that people talk about when they mention family members or whatever, or someone is sent into their life as a honeypot or something like that, and you find out later it's similar to what happens in some of the churches. A lot of people talk about that, where they will send people in there and infiltrate into those places to corrupt them, right? And I've mentioned that it's not like this for everybody, but if you're one of those targets who's experiencing the higher forms of harassment, this was planned out a long time before you ever knew anything about gang stalking. Okay. And, it's similar to what I get into when you get into the dimensional stuff. And it sounds ridiculous, but we got to address this because it's part of the landscape of the target individual. And I've used the biblical examples like, Paul and Silas and Philippi, where the girl was following Paul around, and she was a prophetess. In that area, she had the ability to forecast future events and do other things, and she made a lot of money for her masters in that area, and she was pretty popular. It's like a modern day witch, a soothsayer or whatever. And not all that stuff is a shotgun technique. There's people out there who've never experienced the real stuff, and they just think all those things are games, or they just see people messing around with tarot cards and nothing ever happens. There are spiritual forces and beings involved in that stuff, and they have a plan. Okay, similar to what you see in astrology, the accurate stuff, the deep stuff, or the destiny philosophy involved in the secret societies, where they have that type of polytheistic mythos. And, it's similar to the stuff that targets deal with, where people might be reading your mind, or they might know what you're thinking, or they know where you're going, or they're waiting for you when you get there, or, it's just things that can't be explained naturally. Okay. And there's a way that stuff works for the people in the secret societies. They deal with that stuff too. And sometimes it involves things that are prophesied or forecasted, or whatever you want to call it, in advance, decades or even longer. Okay. And, there's things in Deuteronomy that talk about God will allow those things to come to pass to test people. And not only that, but there are delusions that are sent to people who refused to believe the truth and to love the truth. And so there's a ways that people can become enmeshed and involved in something, maybe even something like a near-death experience, where they meet this angelic being who says, no, there's no Jesus, there's no God, there's no judgment at all, and you're reincarnated 50 million times, and life is just this level system, and you're on the fifth planet, And it's like, I felt so much peace, and it felt so good, and I just, everything in my life is working out now. But that doesn't change reality, and that would be an example of a delusion. Okay, and they believe it, and there's reinforcement around it. There's stimuli, there's dreams, there's things interacting in their environment with them to get them to believe that lie. And they're going to find out later. It's similar with the secret societies, is that they have those prophecies, they have that destiny philosophy, they have the Rosicrucian stuff, the hidden knowledge and the secret wisdom, and it's all amalgamated together. And you get into the higher levels of Freemasonry, and you have these things, and you can take all this stuff way back to after the Tower of Babel, when God handed over the nations to the principalities and powers, or the Shadu and the Shadim, which are they're very powerful angelic beings. Okay, and there was a time where they failed and they were judged in Psalm 82. You have the Deuteronomy 32:8 view. You guys have probably heard me mention Michael Heiser's stuff before. You can look at that stuff in the playlist. But you have an infrastructure in the spiritual dimension that's doing all this stuff, very similar, like I said, to what targets deal with, but different. So, and in order to understand all this weird stuff that happens to targets, to understand how these people can know things, or where technology comes from. A lot of targets will talk about the technology involved in gangstalking and the direct energy weapons, or all this. Just the last few hundred years, we've come a long way, and our technological advancements in society, that it goes all the way back to what happened in the Genesis 6 account. So you have to amalgamate this stuff together properly and understand that even if you're just dealing with the technological aspect of this, there is still that amalgamation. There is still an enmeshment of the landscape of what the target individual is dealing with. And when you get into the bloodlines, as I was referencing earlier, or generational stuff, or a plan, more specifically, that is launched against people, where you have different targeted individuals who will talk about dealing with honeypots or infiltrators into their life, and sometimes they're in for the long con. Sometimes you'll be around these people for years or even decades, and then you'll find out that their intentions were malevolent. Okay, that something was going on. They weren't just there by accident, or some of the people that come into churches. And a lot of targets will talk about maybe getting gang stalked at church or whatever, and they're there. Okay, they're everywhere. They're all over the place. And you have to realize that most of the world is going to go along with that plan that I referenced earlier, that they have a plan. It's like the stuff that they forecast in astrology, or the tarot cards or whatever, and they have a plan. Now, God can save people out of these plans, and he has the freedom to override that stuff. And you can kind of get into a type of open theism debate on that, where a lot of people will call it dynamic omniscience. Is God learning stuff? That doesn't make sense. I thought he knew exactly just because he knows what's going to happen doesn't mean he's ordaining it. And at the same time, he is free to change whatever he wants. Okay. So the major flow of society is going to go along with this plan that involves that hidden knowledge, the secret wisdom, all those things that they use to deceive people. And the major flow is going to be in that final outcome. However, on an individual basis, it can change. Okay, so because you get into fatalism, when you start looking at all these things, a lot of people will say, "Well, I don't know, this doesn't make sense." When you get into what you're talking about concerning prophecies or their plan or whatever, or you involve all these different concepts that usually get out of context, like the predestination or whatever, it just seems like it doesn't matter, right? Because that's what they believe. They believe in destiny. They believe that they're locked into this whole thing. So like I said earlier, they do this stuff, they get involved. There's a lot of pressure of their families or whatever. There's generational things involved, and they get indoctrinated to believe that this is their destiny. not only have they kind of sold themselves out and engaged in some of these different things, like I mentioned, the different sins or the different oaths or whatever they'll do, or they'll get their hands dirty at gang stalking or whatever. But they believe that it's like their destiny, and so there is a fatalism, but it's a lie. Okay, they can repent, anybody can get away, anyone can have salvation, anyone can have eternal life, and it's all accessed the same way. But when you're dealing with this landscape of gang stalking, you have to confront the obvious, demonic origins of everything that you're dealing with, concerning the secret societies and the infiltration into the government, the deep state, and all that stuff, and the secret programs and all these things that they're doing to people, along with the plan to control society as a whole, and take this infrastructure not only into the New World Order, but the final slaughter that is going to happen. I talked about that in one of the videos that I made, that there is a final harvest. There's two. There's a harvest of souls for people who are going to live forever in Christ, and there's also a big slaughter they're moving towards, and that is to take as many people to hell as they can. Period. Okay, and they're going to do that. They're moving up to it. I've talked about the difference between the New World Order and the kingdom of the Antichrist, and there is a difference. Okay, the New World Order is different than that. The Antichrist, at least in my opinion, has a very specific purpose, and that is more over in the Middle East. And it's when you get into the 70 weeks of Daniel, that specifically involves the Jewish people at the heart of that. And you have the desolations and the judicial hardening of the Jews, and then the gospel goes out to the nations after they crucified Christ. Of course, they were judicially hardened way back. Technically, the word came to Jeremiah the prophet in 605, and then you had the Babylonian exile, which is the beginning of these desolations, and you can see that all the way through history up until 1948 when they were regathered. Okay, so we know that we're moving towards the end. That's my point. Okay, and you can calculate those things out very accurately, moving away from the lunar calendar and doing the days years conversion. The Jews adopted the Babylonian calendar system when they were in exile. Okay, and that's when you get into the sons of darkness or the original Antichrist type spirit, which is different from the final Antichrist, is typically viewed by people in that they didn't believe that the seed of the woman or the prophesied Messiah was going to be God incarnate, right? Which is really what you're dealing with when you're dealing with the Christ or the Melchizedek, right? The King of Righteousness, Teacher of Righteousness, the King of the Zadok priests, which John the Baptist was one of them. But they moved away from the solar calendar into the lunar calendar of Babylon, and that's when everything got thrown off. The feast days, all that stuff got thrown off, and then you had a huge problem that I suppose I could do a video on that some other time. But the point is, the truth, the times and dates and everything were obfuscated, and so people didn't know how to navigate the landscape of prophecy and through history. And so what happened eventually, they didn't understand, when Jesus showed up, he said, you guys missed the time of your visitation. You didn't know because you're blinded to this whole thing. You were not taught of God and of the prophets. And there was a big fight between the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Essenes. But, getting back into that, that landscape where you're seeing where we're headed, which of course my point was we're headed towards that harvest. Okay, and the evil that you're dealing with is part of that. Okay, it's definitely part of that in the sense that the world is under that spell. It's under the control of these demonic entities. It goes into the government. It goes into the secret societies. There's an infrastructure out there that is used to attack targeted individuals. Okay, and you have to, it's just like I said, it doesn't seem possible that targeted individuals are dealing with all this stuff. At the beginning of the video, I referenced that when they start telling people what's happening to them, they just look crazy, right? There is a way that these things work without them being at the center of some type of $100 billion resource conspiracy where it just doesn't logistically add up. Is that everybody's a part of this stuff, and the infrastructure out there allows for this to happen to anyone who's targeted. Okay, they don't have to, be talking on their phones or following you around with a drone. There is literally an infrastructure. There are themes out there. There's a mechanism in this world already that is there that can be enacted against targeted individuals that's primarily spiritual, and it moves into the secret programs, it moves into the secret societies, it moves into all these aspects of the occult and everything else. And when somebody's targeted, it can just, their whole world is flipped upside down. But you have to understand how that stuff works. And there are people who are enmeshed in this that is generational, goes all the way back to Egypt. You talk about the 7 heads of the dragon and the 10 horns, the 10 kings, 10 toes, 10 horns. That's all for the end. And they're pretty much here now, which primarily over the cosmic geography of the Middle East. But getting back to what I was talking about, when you see where we're headed and you do your due diligence of where we're at in history and prophecy, and looking at Israel being regathered over there, when you do the math and you convert over to the solar calendar, and you look at these prophecies that were going to be revealed towards the end, you have the first 7, which is something that starts at the end of the Babylonian exile. The decree went out in late 538 BC for the Jews to go back. And they lived there for 70 years, from 605 to 536. And they had to organize, a way to travel 1,000 miles. They had to liquidate their businesses, and they didn't get back till 536. But of course, in order to figure out the exact, evidence that I'm getting at, you take 7 times 360, which is the lunar calendar, which is 2,520 days, years. And then you convert that into the solar, right? You multiply it times 0.9857, and you get 2,484 years. And if you take 536 out of 2,484, you get 1948. It's not an accident. Okay, that's not an accident. What am I getting at? I'm getting at the fact that we're headed somewhere, and the awakening of evil, the awakening of the targeted individual into this malevolent world of gag stalking and evil is not by accident. Okay, according to the Dead Sea Scrolls, we're in the last 49 years before the 1,000-year reign of Christ. Now, I'm not saying that I know the day or the hour that Jesus is going to return. And maybe there's some leeway in there. Okay, God's, he's smart, and he doesn't want something out there that's unbiblical in the sense that people are predicting when he's going to return. Okay, I'm not doing that. I'm just saying that we got to be darn close, because we are looking at the prophecies being fulfilled in the Bible, not only of the regathering of Israel and the desolations that were determined, spoken about by the prophet Jeremiah and Daniel and so on and so forth, but we're seeing all that stuff. And when you get into the 7 heads all the way back, like I said at the beginning of these secret societies that rose up, it goes all the way back to Egypt. So when you get into the Freemason stuff and you start looking at that, you were looking at connections that go all the way back to that. So you have the 7 heads, which are ancient Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, Rome, and then you had the Ottoman Empire, which got cast down in 1923. One of the heads had a deadly wound, and now they are rising up again. Recep Tayyip Erdogan is raising up the caliphate, which is a head over in the cosmic geography of the Middle East, where they have the shrine up on the temple, which of course is representative of the first manifestation of the abomination of desolation, and so on and so forth. And you have all these things coming together, and we are moving towards a countdown. We are moving towards a final slaughter and a final harvest. Okay, and you're seeing evil awakening all around you. Okay, and I think gang stalking is at an all-time high. I don't think it's ever been this bad ever in history. I think that and even with the technology that is obviously part of gang stalking, it just makes it that much easier. Okay, You've got a lot of stuff that's going on for targeted individuals, and it's beyond belief. Okay, it's something that has to be reckoned with. It's something that has to be processed properly, because, like I said, some of the mechanisms of obfuscation that targeted individuals are going to deal with is the fact that they're discredited. Okay, that's one of the major things that you're dealing with as a targeted individual. You're dealing with the landscape. You are dealing with the hierarchy and the mechanism that is there, the amalgamation of all these things, the governments, right? The fraternities, right? People who are indoctrinated, and so on and so forth. You're dealing with the infrastructure of power in the world. You are dealing with the puppets. Okay, you're dealing with the programs. You're dealing with all these things, and of course, you move in to the gaslighting process, and psychiatry is part of that. And I'm not saying that they're all after you. I'm not saying psychiatry was invented necessarily for targeted individuals and to discredit people, but it is used against not only targets but everybody. Everybody's in danger of this mechanism of psychiatry that's out there. And I've mentioned before that there are people, and they were involved in some of the higher, I don't know, occult type societies, that they would get together and they have a plan. Okay, they have a plan to obfuscate this and to obfuscate the spiritual reality that is around everyone. And science and psychiatry are part of that. Okay, people are, oh no, they're not being targeted. They're just crazy. They're experiencing mental illness. Oh, that's not demonic. That's a symptom of mental illness. There's no such thing as possession or oppression, or no, they're hallucinating, right? And there's obvious, problems with that. And I've talked about that before. People were really having brain misfires and all these other things that supposedly are, I don't know, at the core of the targeted individual experience, some type of mass delusion. Well, you think that it would be more consistent and it would spread out into different areas, but of course we talked about all those things before. That's not possible. And so you have a landscape, you have a mechanism. You have the infrastructure, you have the methodology that's used before, and I've talked about that. When it comes to targeted individuals, they deal with what is called sensitization, and that's a form of harassment involving subjective stimuli to create associations from actions, words, phrases, environmental stimuli, a type of psychological warfare where the survival mechanisms, both physiological and psychological, are used against the target individual to where they form associations with things. Okay, and it's used in combination with trauma attack techniques for a type of unconsensual invasion into the psyche of the targeted individual. So they will see things differently. They will process information differently. It is a way to reprogram them. Not only that, but to gaslight them into believing that they're crazy and reading into things, right? Because inevitably it's going to happen. If you're sensitized as a target, they will use keywords, phrases, objects of significance to create a type of heightened state of awareness or paranoia that seems unwarranted. I've talked about the targeted individual warranted suspicion. So that's really how it's done, right? Targets are attacked. They might use sign language, or they might use different words or phrases, or different themes, or different types of behaviors or stimuli, or whatever it is, to create that type of association with whatever it is. But of course, the association that's created for the target is something that could be in the environment that other people would not notice, right? So it creates the plausible deniability that is used to attack targeted individuals. Somebody is hacking and maybe jingling their keys, and they say a particular word, and they will do that when they attack maybe, I don't know, the target in different areas. And of course, at first, the target doesn't even know that means anything. And I'm using a hypothetical example. I'm using 3 different data points to connect that together with the type of attack. And so what happens later? Well, the words are going to be used, the stimuli, the jingling of the keys, the behavior, right? But it's always going to involve something to attack the target. So they're going to notice that, but other people, they're not going to know. They could do that to somebody in a grocery store, or maybe at a workplace environment or whatever. Then people are going to think that the target is nuts, that they're just reading into these things. It creates the plausible deniability that's used to attack targets, and it is used randomly to create apprehension and get the target ruminating about things, so that they're always in a state of anticipating this. And the effects of this harassment is that the target is broken down. They are taken into a place of degradation and dysfunction, so that not only are they, processing information differently, not only are they looking for this stuff and in the process of being gaslighted so they can, internalize all these things and be reprogrammed and reformed and mind controlled and all that, but the people around them think they're nuts, right? Because most of the targets out there, and I've talked about this as far as the credibility issue with the target individual community, for all intents and purposes, look crazy, right? And sometimes they are reading into things. But like I said, there is a way that this stuff works, okay? And most people are not going to catch on, right? And a lot of people will, they'll say, come on, de facto. You're preventing people from getting, the proper, psychological treatment and what they need to heal. And these people aren't target individuals. They're schizophrenic. Look at this person. Look, they're making videos about different colored vehicles driving around. And they think these accident scenes are being set up for them. And this stuff isn't happening to these people. Well, that might not be. But the other things are they're happening to them. And that's the effect. The effect of a targeted individual reading into their environment is something that happens because they're attacked, they're traumatized, they form associations, they're indoctrinated, they're sensitized into these things, and then they start looking for stuff, and it's designed in a way where they start seeing it everywhere, even if it's there or if it's not. Okay? And so then you have people who believe the accident scenes are being set up for them, and just things that are logistically impossible, or all the vehicles out there on their commute or government agents driving in unison, with different colors and stuff like that, where you got a green car and then a silver car and then a red car. And all these people are out there, and it's a simulation, and it's all for you. And of course, what happens is people really think they're crazy. And for all intents and purposes, they have been taken into an area of propositional tyranny, but there's a way that it works. Doesn't mean that they're not targeted individuals. It doesn't mean that they're not being harassed. It doesn't mean that they haven't experienced this all-encompassing type of environmental tyranny. It just means that it's getting to them. Okay, and all targeted individuals will go through that. You don't know how to process the information. You don't understand all these things that are happening to you as a target. It's just how it works. Okay, and that's the worst part about trying to deal with this stuff. And I've also mentioned that we'll hypothetically say, and I think that there are people out there who can get into a type of psychosis through maybe drug abuse or other things that a lot of the stuff that they think is targeting is not. But you know what? That doesn't matter, because the methodology that I provide for people is that they process information critically, and that technically the mythos that individuals with schizophrenia or mental illness need to be drugged, or that they need some type of counseling that never really goes anywhere anyway. Even when you go to the because I've been through all this stuff, they don't really have anything. They just you go to a counseling session, and they might bring up some stuff. They want to focus in on whether you were ever sexually abused or some kind of traumatic event that happened to you. And then they give you medication and tell you you're hallucinating or whatever. That's usually what a target individual is going to deal with, or that you're just experiencing, some type of illusion. And they give you drugs, which actually are going to make this stuff worse. And they don't ever get a chance to heal, because they're not rebuilding the building blocks of their life, and they're not being taught to process information critically. So we'll hypothetically assume that someone is, in the classic form, schizophrenic, which I think is pretty rare. Okay, there's a lot of opinions out there. They'll say, well, I think that there's people out there that are being targeted, but most of them are schizophrenic. I don't believe that. I believe it's the opposite. If there are people who are schizophrenic it's pretty rare for targets to, because they fit all in these different themes. But the point I'm making is, what's the real cure for something like that? If somebody is reading into things or whatever, what's the cure? To tell them that they're crazy and they're just imagining all this stuff and to put them on drugs? No, that's not going to help them, because what's going to happen? You will put them on disability, and they're going to sit around in their house, and they're going to sit around, stare at the walls, and they're just going to get worse. And the drugs are going to make their brain worse, and their health is going to decline. They're going to lose the mental edge. They're not going to be involved in the workforce. Just by a type of deprivation and atrophy, they're going to get worse, and they're going to get into a place where they're probably going to have to be institutionalized. That's the classic method that's out there. Not everybody follows that in psychiatry and medicine, but most of them do. They're all involved in protocols now, right? This is what you have. Here's the DSM. You're bipolar, schizophrenic, or whatever. We'll put you on this drug, and call me in a month, and we'll do it again, and we'll up the dose or whatever. Even in the physician's office, psychiatry is involved itself in that. Even when you get into medicine, it's like that. We're not going to address your diet or how you're living or your exercise or anything. We'll just put you on this drug. It's ridiculous. Okay. So in the case that somebody was, what's the solution? Well, you start being critical of how you're processing information. It's the same way targeted individuals battle this, because it's a psychological game, right? And when targets are attacked, when they form these associations, and when they experience the tyranny of the gang stalkers and this menagerie that's out there, they have to realize that there's a motive, and that is to gaslight them, to make them dysfunctional, to get them to process information in a different way, and to take them into a type of manufactured mental illness. And so when you have someone processing information critically, and you have them, fighting back in a way, even if it was a hallucination, to where they're not reacting or getting aggressive or becoming fatalistic or, getting, on different drugs that are going to just make their mental capacity worse. And they get out there and they work. They get out there and they get involved. They start focusing on their health. They start focusing on different things. That's the way that they're going to be healed. So either way, it doesn't really matter. And a lot of people who deal with the perps out there, which have a lot of coincidences, are going to get that. They're going to try and say, well, there's all kinds of progressions in the treatment of schizophrenia. You ought to look into that. There isn't, and I've got the evidence. I've got all that stuff up on the playlist. I've talked about that's very frustrating. When people say that, they're full of it. People are not being healed from schizophrenia with drugs. Okay, they're not. There is no miracle cures out there. And the fact that the Social Security Administration and the insurance companies had to investigate all this stuff and look at what was going on worldwide to figure out why all of a sudden people diagnosed with schizophrenia needed to get on disability and becoming dysfunctional when they weren't in other areas of the world was because people believe that kind of bullshit. Okay, it doesn't help anybody. So you're going to be confronted with that. If you're a target individual, who's been through the classic methodology of gang stalking, one of the things that they're going to do is try to discredit you. Okay, a lot of that comes out when the target is looking for help or trying to process the information in the world around them, or they might call the cops or do whatever they're going to do, or they tell somebody, or their family members start playing games with them or whatever, and then what happens? They become discredited. And so they're going to be confronted with all this stuff, right? And you got to remember that that is gaslighting. Okay, that is a way to BS the target into accepting the fact that all this stuff is just some type of illusion. It's not. Okay, and you have to remember the inconsistencies involved in the perps that you're dealing with, and I've talked about that. A lot of times you'll deal with hostility. People will be angry with you, but at the same time, they'll be telling you that you're suffering from some type of, condition that's beyond your control. Those things they mix like oil and water. It's like the people that persecute targeted individuals and say that, well, I just want them to get help, but they're being hostile, abrasive, and cruel. Okay, that's for why they're supposedly handicapped. What the hell are you talking about? It doesn't add up. It's obvious gaslighting. It's obviously an excuse to just call out the target and get them in a place where they can believe a lie, like, well, if I just go to the hospital or tell a bunch of people about this, and that sometimes they'll even tell the target that if they do that, they'll stop, right? And they will use that type of pragmatic stimuli to make them believe that it's working, but really the whole plan is just to get them on paper as crazy, right? That's all they want. They don't care. They don't. They just want to harass you. They want to get their claws into you, and they want to make it easy, and they want to obfuscate the illegal activity by getting a false diagnosis on the targeted individual so that they can harass, feed on the target, experiment on the target, and just get away with all this stuff, right? And they can also there's financial corruption involved in all this stuff too. So you have to look at all that, and you have to realize that you're going to be confronted with that. And even if, like, the reason I brought that up, a lot of people might be confused to why I brought. What do you mean people are schizophrenic? The reason I brought that up is because even if they were right, even if hypothetically that it was true, they're still being contradictive, and you got to see it. You got to see the fact that even if they were right, their methodology for help, treatment, and solution-based, whatever they're going to present to you, according to what I just talked about, is bullshit. It's not helping anyone. There's no evidence that it ever did. Okay. There's no evidence out there that drugging people up and putting them on disability and getting them into a place where they're just, decaying and atrophying has helped anyone. And that's the innovation and so-called advances with all these drugs and everything that all these idiots are talking about, that just want to victimize you and gaslight you and discredit you. That's all they want. They don't care about that, and none of it works. You got to see the contradictions, guys. You got to see, that these people are contradictive on every level. And I've mentioned that before too, that the perps have a lot of commonalities. They do. Okay, you got to see, there's always a lot of coincidences around these people, right? There's always a lot of BS that is surrounding these individuals that you're dealing with. Okay, they will use all kinds of narcissist techniques. They will play games with you. They will reframe everything. They will try to throw it back on you. They will distort your reality. They will try to use leverage. They will try to provoke the target, and then they will accuse them. Right? You're overreacting. They're fake. Okay, they're completely and totally contradictive. And even when it comes to the disinformation and the slander campaign that is used against targets, I've talked about the contradictions there. That there are a lot of people out there in the world that are on paper committing horrible crimes, sexual deviancy, drugs, everything, all the stuff the targets are accused of, and no one is gangstalking them. No one's going after them. Okay. And if this was all, God's justice against you, or they really had the right to do these things to you, why are they obfuscating the activity? Why are they, using such covert methods to do these things? And why are they ignoring other people that are, a lot of this stuff is just hypothetical against targets. So I heard this, or somebody showed me a document about that, or I heard, well, you don't even have to, worry. But there's people on a map. There's people with mugshots who've done this. Talk to me and go after them, right? And even when you get into some of the stuff that targets are, supposedly being convinced of, that everybody's reading their mind or watching them all the time, and they seem to know your business too. Well, what about all the other people that, like Dennis Rader, or other examples like Gary Ridgway, the Seattle, Green River killer, right? The other people around that guy he worked around a lot of people. No workplace harassment. Nobody obviously reading their mind. Nobody knew about it. Dennis was a deacon at his Lutheran church, had a real good reputation up there in Kansas. And if there's supposedly psychotronic devices out there and supercomputers that are reading everybody's mind, they must not have been around when those guys were doing it. I mean, there's still people out there. They haven't figured out these different crimes, or they hold back the information on the Kennedy assassination. Ain't nobody figured it out. Well, I think there's a reason, and I think it shows the demonic origins of this stuff, and they'll turn people against targets. And they it's not that all these things are happening in a way where they're watching you, or they all have cameras, or they're spying on you, or there's drones looking through your walls, or sometimes it's purely demonic. It's like the stuff in witchcraft, okay? Or you get into the things involved in remote viewing, right? What's that? That stuff is real, okay? It's like automatic writing or other things that involve, occult practices where you're getting into some demonic stuff there, okay? That stuff is not just, it's real. It's not just a bunch of hype, and it's done by people being connected to entities outside of our dimension. Okay, it's a dimensional thing, and I've talked about that before. But the perps do have a lot of commonalities, and yes, some of them are getting paid. Yes, some of them are part of secret programs, or they're just narcissist pukes who need to control people, and they get sucked into this through social dynamics or whatever. But you also have individuals involved in different lineages, involved in things like witchcraft or spiritual stuff involving the secret societies, spiritual wickedness in high places that have that type of extra dimensional knowledge. And when a target experiences these things, when a target experiences higher forms of harassment, where they try to go on the run, they can't get away. They go to a hotel, they're waiting for them, or they're following them, or they know what you're thinking, or people are walking up to them in public places, and they know the thoughts that are running through your mind, and all those things are not done primarily through some type of government technology necessarily. It's literally demonic. Okay, so, that would be the big difference between me and a lot of people out there. Is a lot of people don't like that. Okay, but like I said, if you do your due diligence, you're going to run into a big chasm, a big split, right? Because the logistics don't make sense. You can't have everybody working for the CIA. You can't have targeted individuals who they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars to do all these things and create this Truman-like environment around you just to freak you out, where you're getting some gummy bears down at the grocery store, or you're trying to go work at the Dairy Queen or whatever, and it follows you around for decades. And then of course people are like, wow, boy, so you're dealing with this huge government conspiracy that's after you, and they're spending who knows how much money, and they set all these things up to where it's the TV's talking to you, and the radio, and you go out in the country and they're waiting for you. There's planes and drones, and wow, you must be special. No, it's already there. It's already there, and the mechanism is targeted you. You're on the hit list, man. And when you get it, a lot of people will talk about the chosen, and they will take that into a different area, and it's interesting. Like I said, the link to that video is up there. And it's important, not to, take words out of context. But I think it was the book, the Black Awakening, that the chosen ones in there are different, right? Because a lot of people will say, well, you're a chosen one. Some people will joke around and say, well, you're chosen to get yourself driven nuts by all these people. You do have a choice. Not all targets. It's not just like a soteriological doctrine to where just because you're getting gang stalked means you're good or that you're going to go to heaven or whatever. You have a choice, okay? And like I said, if you're a target individual out there and you're experiencing this stuff, you want to draw near to God and ask Him for help, because you're way over your head. And if you don't see that this stuff is evil, you're missing everything, okay? You need God. You need His help. You needed Him anyway. And if this is what it takes to wake you up, then it's a blessing to you. But the chosen ones are really people, like I said, sometimes this goes into lineages and stuff like that, where people are dealing with that weird stuff I talked about that goes all the way back to Egypt, when you have the bloodlines and all those things. A lot of people will use the Western families, Astri, Bundy, Collin, Freeman, Onassis, Merovingian, DuPont, so on, and they'll get into the royal families, and some of that stuff is true. But the chosen ones are people who are chosen to be one of these people that are in these lineages or whatever. And I've talked about some of the things that are surrounding the target individual, the infrastructure of society that is created, that something like this could be possible without hundreds of millions of dollars or, government assets being turned against you to put you in a Truman environment. It's already there. The infrastructure is there. All these things are already set up. The themes are there. The mechanism is already there. You're thrown into the meat grinder. You're thrown into the system. It's turned against you. It doesn't have to be specifically tailored to anyone because it's predictable. And we're all very similar as far as, what we are as human beings. And I've talked about that. We're like little, fleshly computers, right? It's like the stuff that a lot of targets will say, I don't know, I just got these things bouncing around in my head all the time now. And when I multitask or I do something else, it seems to help out the V2K. Well, it could, that there's nothing wrong with that. And you're distracting yourself using dialectic behavioral therapy in the sense that you're kind of short-circuiting the programming that they got in your brain. It's like the psychic driving. I've talked about that before. If someone is dealing with 24-hour V2K or demonic stuff, or there's different things just bouncing around in your head, you have to try to short-circuit that stuff and neutralize it, okay? Because it's repetition. You're like a little fleshly computer, okay? That's what we are. We can be programmed. We can listen to a song. You think about it. You turn on, some type of device or whatever, you listen to something over and over and over and over and over, similar to what happened in MK Ultra. What's going to happen when you turn it off? You're still going to be hearing it. It's still going to be bouncing around in your brain. A lot of this stuff is just repetition. Okay, a lot of this stuff is a process of reprogramming target individuals. Beginning back to the point, when you get into these chosen ones, when you get into these lineages, when you get into the infrastructure of society, when you get into some of the plans that are enacted against target individuals, there is I don't know, you can call it whatever you want, a conspiracy. There are people who know about this stuff, and some of them know more than others. Okay, and they do. They will get sent into people's lives. They will get sent into different organizations and into the government, into churches, into the infrastructure of the world, and they're there to do the work of their masters. Okay, and it's evil. It's demonic. It sounds crazy, but that's the way it is. Okay. And so it's obfuscated. They use the plausible deniability. There's mechanisms like psychiatry, and people are discredited, and so on and so forth. They're sensitized. They deal with incremental infiltration into their mind. I've talked about the repetitive stuff that target individuals deal with over and over and over again to create the medium, the framework, and the target individual's mind that you're expecting this stuff. You're looking for it. You're apprehensive. You're ruminating. They're controlling you. You're using all this stuff to invade your psyche, and reform the target, to reprogram them, to use traumatic mind control on targets to invade their life and use them for everything from experiments to vessels of wrath and just basically pieces of meat to feed on. And also as bait for the people who are doing this stuff. Like I said, they're going to get their hands dirty. They're going to get involved in these things. It's like the 7 rooms of sin that I talked about, where these people in these secret societies, or the oaths, where they engage in different sexual acts, or the drinking of blood, or the eating of different things involving forbidden, I don't know, the spirit cooking kind of stuff. I'm not even going to go into the details on that, but it's a way to get people's hands dirty, to get them involved, to get them to sell out, to get them to feel condemned, to get them to believe in that destiny philosophy that they've been involved in. It's out there. Okay, and targets need to know how these things work, and we need to see exactly where we're headed as a collective. Okay, and there is an evil awakening. Okay, and it's worse than it used to be. It is. There are a lot more people that are dealing with this stuff, and they're dealing with it on different levels. And I've mentioned before that just because someone is not getting gang stalked in the classic sense, or that they're dealing with targeting like you are, it doesn't mean they're not dealing with this stuff. Some of the people just believe they're crazy. Some of the people out there are dealing with very subtle forms of what targeted individuals deal with. It's very aggressive for you. It's obvious. You know what's happening. You know you're being hunted down. You know that these people are out to get you. You know that people are breaking into your house and moving stuff around, or whatever you're dealing with at the workplace. You're getting surveillance. It's obvious. They're attacking your personal. What about those people out there that are getting the subtle stuff? They don't know. They have no idea that they're targeted angels too, or the people that are gaslighted into believing that they're really the opposite gender, or something else that involves obvious evil that goes against the natural order. Evidence, including prophecy, is all around us, and we're headed into that harvest. I'm going to go into the comments and see who's out there on the live stream. Oh, Pamela Barone, welcome to live stream. Rise, welcome to live stream. Nicholas Bosman, welcome. I'm not stressing, welcome to live stream. Jeremy M., it's always nice to see you here. Yeah, and Jeremy says, I just act like the star of my own damn show, and everyone around me, the stalkers, is just unimportant extras. I mean, that's it. That's good. He's got good advice. Jeremy knows how to cancel and neutralize these guys, and it's basic. You don't want to give them a reaction. You don't want to play into their game. You want to acknowledge nothing, deny everything, and look straight ahead. I mean, it's the perfect strategy. And focus on things you can control. Focus on your financial life. Focus on your health. Try to focus on things that they don't have direct control over. It's not easy because it's you're isolated as a target. One of the worst parts about this is what do you hope for? Is it going to change? Because it seems like it's just getting worse. And I've talked about that before. Sometimes it seems like that. But remember that there's always the option for things to get better, no matter how far down it gets, that God has created this place that way, and that he can turn it around very quickly. There's always the option. You're dealing with the genius of God, and it's just displayed through the life of Jesus. He made an eyeball out of some dirt. He healed people. Lazarus, he was dead for 4 days, right? It's never too late with God, and it's never too late for you. Okay, but it seems like it. Oh my gosh! I mean, I've been down so far before. I thought there's no way I'm coming out of this. I'm going to lose my mind. I'm going to go nuts. I'm in a hotel somewhere. All this stuff. Your ears are ringing. You can't think. You've been drugged. You've been fumed. All these things are going on. Your property is attacked. You don't know if you're gonna. Your body is shot. You can't. You don't think you can keep going. And somehow, some way, God makes a way. And you realize after the whole thing was over that it was a way for them to kind of test you out and see if you're gonna, you give in on it. And a lot of that is missed by people in the sense that the criteria of this slaughter involves the propositional tyranny that is pushed on targets and the rest of the world, that has to do with, redefining the word of God. All right. God isn't who he says he is, or Christ isn't who he says he is, or you can't trust the Bible, or, everything is just religion, or there's no life after death, or, I don't know, God's probably not going to have mercy on me. All that stuff is always on the table. And it's like I talked about earlier, that there's a way that people believe these lies, whether it's the individuals involved in the secret societies that give in to that hidden knowledge and secret wisdom and believe in the destiny philosophy according to the stimuli and the tyranny created by the kingdom of darkness, or the delusions of people who believe in reincarnation, that they're coming back and they've, they're old souls or whatever. And it's very convincing because that's what happens. And the situational and environmental stimuli is organized around deceiving people and giving them those delusions. They're going to push that at you. They're going to offer those things to you. They're going to try to get you bitter. They're going to try and get you that place of hopelessness. And sometimes it's tempting, and God help us, but it can be done. And I've mentioned before, if you have a prayer request or whatever, put that in the comments. If you have an idea for a future video or topic, put that in there as well. And I'd like to thank everybody out there who's been praying for me. My arm feels a heck of a lot better. I've been working. It fact, I just took today off. I worked, I think it was like over 40 hours or whatever in the last 5 days. But it works. Prayer works. And don't forget that as a target. You can always pray, and God can always fix it. Moving into the comment section, Leo, welcome to the live stream. I'm not stressing. Let me see what you're talking about. Okay, and I'm not stressing says, if I went to bed tonight thinking I needed to sleep, I'll awake festering in this dark energy. Oh man, yeah, they got you, anticipating the whole thing. And it's hard not to do that. I get pessimistic. I'm going to admit I have a lot of weaknesses, and you get attacked so much and you deal with so much stuff. It's really hard to be positive. And I deal with that all the time, man. But it can happen. And I would just pray that, when you do go to sleep tonight, everybody please join in with that prayer that there would be peace for not only I'm stressing or not stressing, excuse me, but for everybody else who's dealing with that there would be peace and tranquility and a time of refreshment for all the people out there dealing with this type of persecution, and the individuals involved in this would be brought to light and brought to justice. It's a godly desire that these people stop doing what they're doing and be held accountable. Okay, they need to be caught. They need to be brought out in the open. And I've talked about that before, that it's not if this is ever going to get taken care of or if these people, it's when. It's not a matter of hope. It's a matter of knowing that this stuff is going to come out, and these people are going to be dealt with. And eventually there's going to be perfect justice and righteousness at the return of the Lord. But I just pray for that, for all the people out there who are worried about that stuff, and myself, because I'm worried about it too. I think about it every day. I deal with that same type of thought all the time. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? Oh, it's going to be bad. It's always like that. When you get attacked, not only, if you're one of those people who deal with V2K or where you get attacked by the demonic, it's always negative. It's always worst case scenario. That's part of the programming that target individuals deal with, because they deal with things that are so unbelievable and so heinous. And, it's always something. It just doesn't seem like you can ever, escape the tyranny of this whole thing. And it's easy to get, caught up in that. But it can change. It can change. And even if the circumstances don't change, God can give you peace and refreshment and refine you, even in the midst of it. And, there's a lot of people out there who are involved in this stuff that have a lot. They're involved in gang stalking, or they're involved in the corruption of the kingdom of darkness in the world system that I've talked about before. And they got all the cotton candy and all that, the bells and whistles, but they're not happy. And you can be satisfied even in a place of deprivation as a target individual. And, there's that scripture. And I can't remember who it was that corrected me on that. I think it was Peter that said, the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and minds. And I think that that's something that targets can count on. At least it's happened to me. Sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes you're taken to the edge. But you will have that time of refreshment. And I just pray that I'm not stressing experiences that very, very, very soon. And let's see what else out there. King Jr., welcome. Let's see. Burger Boy. Oh, okay. Welcome. Glad to see you in here, Burger Boy. Okay, well, Burger Boy has a positive injection for this. It says, Doc, you have for years been a hopeful and helpful voice to so many. Bless you, dude. It's the message that can help the glory of God and the conquerors of all evil. Well, thank you very much. I'd like to hope that everybody shares that belief, and that I haven't, because a lot of times I'll get confused of sensitizing people and making them worse or whatever. I don't do that. I admit I've made videos in the past where I do a lot of sound bites, and sometimes it confuses targets, and I try to be consistent and positive. But in order to make those entertaining sound bites and different things, sometimes I have to illustrate things that people are sensitized to. But hopefully everybody understands that I'm not doing that to trigger them. I'm doing it so that they can see, some of the ridiculous stuff that stalkers pull, and some of the games that are, out there that that target individuals deal with. And it's good to laugh. It's good to try to find humor, and rather than being angry or being provoked or being anxious or stressed or depressed. Sometimes you just got to laugh at this whole thing because it is just beyond, man, isn't it? It's just beyond. Okay, let's see here. Okay. Okay, looks like Pamela Barone is talking about something. I'm trying to figure out what it is. Oh, okay. So it looks like you guys are talking about different objects being switched around, and so on and so forth. A lot of times that'll happen. And the creepy part about it, because you guys were talking about that, I think it was Matson Miles and Pamela, is the creepy part of it is, it's not always, at least what I've seen, it's not always people that are doing that kind of stuff. I mean, sometimes it is. I've caught people moving around garbage cans or breaking into your house or whatever. But there's been stuff that I've dealt with that was not human. There is a demonic aspect to this whole thing, and it's just creepy when that happens. And you'll see a lot of testimonies of people who've dealt with spiritual stuff like that, poltergeist activity, whatever, where you'll have even things that sound like they're in your house and there's nothing there. I had that happen to me where it sounded like somebody was throwing around a big, 30-gallon garbage sack. I could feel it on the walls, and it was loud. The cat was freaking out, man. She's scared. She's sitting next to me, and I got cameras all over my house. And so I'm sitting right in front of it now. I'm looking at 7 cameras. I got cameras on every aspect except for one wall on the outside because it's right next to my neighbor, and I don't want them thinking that I'm spying in their windows and stuff. But there's nothing in my house. There's nothing here. And I could feel it. I could hear it. It was loud. And it was even in the winter. So there was, not only was there no one running around outside, because you would have seen the tracks, which is usually kind of fun for targets. If they're dealing with stuff like that, where people are literally attacking their drug, at least the snow makes it obvious. If you guys have ever had that one happen, I even had a perp say, "I can't wait until the snow goes away," because they knew, because they're coming up to the windows and banging on the house and everything, but nothing out there. How do I explain something like that? I don't know. Like I said, it wasn't just me; it was the cat. And we could hear it. We could feel it on the walls. It was loud. Well, it's the only thing I could figure it was demonic. Now, some people might say that's some type of technological thing. I don't have evidence of that. What I do have evidence, and I'm sure they're working on that stuff. I wouldn't deny it. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we perceive, and they're electronic. You got the chemical signals and the physiology of the human being, and different things that can affect you. That's absolutely true. But I know one thing is that when you look at all this stuff and you break it down, there's demonic stuff going on. And, when you're dealing with objects that just appear and disappear and stuff, sometimes that stuff is demonic. And I think I talked about that a little while ago, that I went to change my oil, and I used a little crescent wrench. It's a little more finesse to get that oil plug off because it's stripped out a little bit. Using a socket just doesn't work when you tighten it up. And I keep it in a very specific location, and I have this little bucket full of stuff, and I got all these other things. I try to keep it kind of organized, and I got it out there, dumped it all out, looked at it, it wasn't there, and I'm like, okay, let me do this again. So I'm organizing and I'm setting it all out there. I did it several times. I went through the whole back of the vehicle. I'm like, gosh, well, I'll just go get another one. I got to do this. I got to go oil changed. And so I put everything back in the bucket, put it back in the car, went over to the parts store, got a crescent wrench, came back, Got all that stuff out again. As soon as I pulled it out, there it was sitting right on the top, right there in that bucket that I looked through who knows how many times. Is that possible? Could I, and some of that stuff is like people talk about witchcraft or they talk about illusions. It had to have been there. I'm not saying that it was off in the leprechaun pile of lost riches and they just kind of teleported it back. But how is it? How did I not see that? And I've seen that kind of thing happen a lot of times. I think Matt Miles referenced an example where he actually had somebody come 70 miles or something like that to a place where he was working because the keys were gone. And when they got there, all of a sudden they were in the ignition of the vehicle. That stuff, I mean, what do? You have no excuse at that point. People are really looking at you like you're nuts, right? Or I've gone on deliveries before where I'll look at the house number. It's not rocket science to be a delivery guy, and I'll pull in, and I'm at a completely different house. I had to, I had to start looking at that. When that happened to me, it was always a day where I was getting attacked heavily. And it's how could you, and I would do that. I would be like, okay, I'm going to double check, triple check the number on the house. And I'd get up there and it was the wrong house. I was like, there's no way. I mean, it's just the stuff that targets deal with. I mean, it's all very consistent in the sense that the gaslighting process is to get you to question your perception, right? All of it, every aspect of what the target individual deals with is nothing more than a mass, project to convince you that you're crazy, right? Everything, the directed conversations, the moving around of objects, the break-ins, the covert poisoning, the fact that everybody turns against the target all at once, their whole landscape, the reality flip they deal with, people are treating them differently. They're being influenced, socially, or they're being influenced demonically, or maybe with money. Now, there's a million ways it can happen, but it's all in your head. It's all just a figment of your imagination. Let's see what else is going on here. Okay. Starlight Worker, welcome to the live stream. Okay. Now, Rise says he's had a lot of things like that happen to him as well. Okay. And Nicholas Boserman says they took my keys over and over. I had to change my locks, my ignition, and my drive. They'll do that. And the thing about it is you'll find it in a place where you didn't damn well leave it. Or you look there several times and it wasn't there. And then, the final time you look, a week later, they'll show up, in the freezer or something or some ridiculous thing. And it's like, yeah, I don't think so. And it used to be a lot more popular. Now bump keys and everything like that are used. If they can, they'll get your keys. There are boots on the ground, and they can just take a piece of clay. Technically, they don't have to steal them. They can take a piece of clay and just, mash it in there and then create a little composite. And they can, without taking your keys, they can do it that way. But yeah, they'll do that kind of stuff, and you just don't know. It gets ridiculous when you try to fight all these little games that are coming at you. It's almost better just to get a security system and not worry about it. There's other ways, but if you guys come up with different methods and techniques to secure your dwelling, put it up there. Put it up in the comments, man. Put it on a channel of your own or whatever, because it is important. You don't give up on stuff like that. You don't just give in and throw away the whole idea of trying to keep your house secure and safe. You got to try. You might have to change your locks. You might have to do something. But yeah, I'd be interested in seeing some advice on that. Okay. On average, Joe, welcome to the live stream. Oh, that's interesting. On average, Joe says, just saw that Ohio is putting up billboards for the immigrants up there, the Haitian immigrants, to report hate crimes. They got a lot of them up there. I don't remember. It's like, I don't know how many. I think they've got over 500,000 of them in Florida, and now they're shipping them off. I guess they're flying them out of airports and taking them. Just Ohio has got, gosh, I think like 15,000 of them now documented up there in Springfield, Ohio. I think a lot of stuff going on up there. And then, of course, I think Trump used that in the debate where he was talking about they're eating people's pets or whatever. I think that might have been a misinformation scenario there. I don't know if that was really true. I think that might have been somebody that was on drugs or something that just ended up eating a cat of all things. Can you imagine seeing something like that? I guess they just were eating it raw. Some lady was just grabbed this cat and just killed it, and blood on her, and and the cops are like, "Whoa, this is gross." Oh my gosh, what did you do? Ugh. Oh my gosh, you got to be pretty hungry. I mean, you'd think somebody would just go get a burger or something. Somebody. A lot of people panhandle for vodka. You're bound to at least eventually find somebody that'll pay for a chicken burger or something. But I don't know, man. Whatever. Uh, yeah, Starlight Worker says much happens that is unexplainable, hard to ignore. It is. You're dealing with technology. You're dealing with a very scientific framework. You're also dealing with things that are dimensional. So yeah, I mean, it makes you look nuts. You gotta know when to keep your mouth shut. That's for sure. Okay, let's see what's going on out here. Starlight Worker, I've literally felt and heard something or someone that seemed like they were in the room. Not visible, though. It's difficult to process at times uh, when you're being logical. Okay. Well, I don't know. I mean, technically, that's good advice, and you put that in there in a way that was smart in the sense that you're not assuming something, you're just presenting the evidence, right? A lot of targets will be accused. Well, how do you know what it was? How do you know de facto? How do you know somebody's dealing with something spiritual? How do you know somebody's dealing with, well, you know what you know. And, if that kind of thing is happening, there's a lot of possibilities, but it is difficult. Okay. It is difficult to try and figure something like that. I like to promote the solution for everything. Doesn't matter whether you're dealing with technological stuff, doesn't matter whether you're dealing with something that's demonic. You want to draw near to God and ask Him to help you and submit to Him, right? That's the solution for everything. That's ultimately where all this is going. Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, targets are dealing with things. It's like, when you start putting all this stuff in one basket, it's when you run into problems. Well, I think all this stuff is just technology. Well, now you're denying what the Bible's talking about. You're in a fight with the Bible now, right? What are all what about all the examples of demonic oppression and possession and stuff like that? Now it's all just some supercomputer. Well, no, that's not possible. Okay. And there's a lot of evidence out there that would talk about this. Not only, but if you're going to get into the secret societies and the framework of the deep state, you're looking at people involved in, a lot of that weird stuff. And they get convinced by that type of extra dimensional activity, of that destiny philosophy. It's everywhere. Okay. Pamela Brown says, I know it sounds nuts. I know no one else was here, and I have felt spiritually attacked for 10 straight days. That happens. that happens. I've been dealing with that kind of stuff too, man. And I don't. When I get like that, I don't know what to do except just try to ignore it, pray, and then try to be as productive as possible. I usually put it into work if I can, because it's really hard to enjoy yourself. When you're getting that kind of stuff, a lot of times it can involve a sense of anxiety, panic. It can be very depressing to deal with that kind of thing. You get taken into a lot of different psychological forms of manipulation and demonic attack. That's primarily what. Sometimes it'll afflict your body too, and then of course you get the people that are manipulated and they're doing things to you, and it's horrible. I just throw a prayer out there for Pamela that she would experience relief, as I talked about earlier, for all targeted individuals experiencing that type of demonic oppression. That there would be an intervention and a time of refreshing and a time of peace. And rather than to try to figure out exactly why it's happening, just to know that even though we might not know all the answers and the explanations as to why God is allowing something, he knows what he's doing and he can fix it and he can make it work out for the good. Okay. All right. Well, guys, I think I'm gonna end the live stream now. I gotta watch out. If I talk too long, my throat's gonna get sore again. And I think we covered most of that stuff. We talked about the flip of reality and the framework that the target individual deals with, and how it's representative of that final destination that we're all headed to, and that's judgment, and how we are moving through prophecy. And I think gangstalking is at an all-time high right now. I think spiritual activity and wickedness and deception and evil and immorality, it's all escalated. And it's a type of awakening. It's a type of dark awakening. It's a type uh, of undeniable manifestation of malevolent evil that we are all dealing with. And it involves the infrastructure. It involves lineages. It involves things. I think Rise just mentioned something about the Masons, and all that stuff is connected. Not all of them know about that stuff, but when you get into the higher levels of witchcraft, Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, and these different fraternities, and even the infrastructure of the world, and you get into programs like MK Ultra and other things, COINTELPRO, you can see it. You can see all these things amalgamated together, and it's there to discredit you. A lot of that just sounds ridiculous, and if you start talking about it, and you experience the targeted individual labyrinth, it's designed to discredit you. It's designed to fit that persecutory delusion. Understanding the landscape and amalgamating these things together, and understanding the science behind gang stalking, the sensitization, the plausible deniability, the incremental infiltration, the honeypots, the people that know, the people that are just indoctrinated and think targets are crazy, the repetitive subjection, the psychic driving, and the reprogramming, and how there are mechanisms out there like psychiatry and other things that just, it fits like a glove. It's actually very effective. And targets, by and large, I think they underestimate what they're dealing with. It's more than technology. It's more than just sadistic people. This stuff is evil, and it involves something that has been planned out in advance. And like I said, if you guys check that out, I haven't read it. I haven't looked into that. So I would imagine there's probably things I wouldn't agree with concerning the Black Awakening, that book out there. I don't know. I have never read it, but I know the interesting part about it is they reference, people that were chosen to kind of infiltrate society. And it's like a type of evil satanic plan that these people are literally called the chosen ones. I haven't really looked into that. Like I said, there's a link in the description to that midnight ride that gets into some of this stuff. So you guys can watch that. And like I said, I don't always agree with everything on there. I'm not a flat earther. I don't believe in the pre-tribulation rapture. I believe in a rapture, and I believe in a different uh, map of eschatology than a Roman Antichrist. I have a lot of differences with those guys, but I thought it was an interesting video. I thought it was a good one. I thought you guys wouldn't be interested in that because it's very similar to what targets deal with. You have people who are literally, they're involved in a plan. They're involved in a conspiracy, and it's hidden. It's very covert. It's under the radar, and it involves the same things that targets deal with, where you get into all kinds of different manipulation, where people are involved in this stuff. They get their hands dirty, and it involves, using gaslighting and using different forms of subjective mind control to, reframe someone's reality and control them, and to warp their mind, to seduce them with different forms of stimuli, maybe even sex. When you get into the honeypots and stuff, check it out. The link is in the description. Also, the link if you want to help support me in the channel. I'd like to thank everybody who prays for me. I'd like to thank everybody who helps support me in the channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Guys, God bless. Be good to yourselves. Be safe.